Hi, this is Ira Gorlick, and this lecture is going to combine a number of the previous lectures into a new way of looking at Hayek using 21st century tools. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use distributed internet architecture. Now, I described distributed internet architecture in the class on telecommunications technology in the lecture on internet technology, and I'm going to show how Hayek can be applied today using that architecture. I'm going to use Hayek's essay, The Use of Knowledge in Society, as the foundation for this discussion. You might want to go back to that and get a copy of it and follow along. I'm also going to use the Barbara Van Schweck Internet Architecture and Innovation and combine all of those into a new way of looking at Hayek. So let me quote Hayek here. I'll just read this because it's interesting. All economic activity is in this sense planning, and in any society in which many people collaborate, this planning, whoever does it, will in some measure have to be based on knowledge which, in the first instance, is not given to the planner but to somebody else, which somehow will have to be conveyed to the planner. The various ways in which the knowledge on which people base their plans is communicated to them is the crucial problem for any theory explaining the economic process, and the problem of what is the best way of utilizing knowledge initially dispersed among all the people is at least one of the main problems of economic policy, or of designing an efficient economic system. So remember the learning objective. The learning objective is to determine the optimum role of the community in commerce. Well, here's Hayek saying what the essential problem is in doing that. And it's all about information. It's all about planning. It's all about knowledge. So my thinking is, can we come up and using 21st century tools solve this problem that Hayek points to? And I think the answer is yes, and let me show you how. So again, on Hayek on central planning, this is not a dispute about whether planning is to be done or not. Planning in the specific sense in which the term is used in contemporary controversial necessarily means central planning, direction of the whole economic system according to one unified plan. It is a dispute as to whether planning is to be done centrally by one authority for the whole economic system or to divide it among many individuals. And this is the key, is that Hayek was anti-socialist and anti-central planning. I absolutely agree with him. There is no logic behind having one central authority do anything, that it makes more sense to move planning down into individuals. Competition, on the other hand, means decentralized planning by many separate persons. So I'm going to add two more terms that Hayek didn't talk about, and that is distributed architecture and meta-communication. And these are terms that I bring from communication directly into this discussion. And then I'm going to show how Hayek can fit into the 21st century by applying internet architecture to his foundational thinking. So let's think a little about distributed architecture. And when the phone company was first started, and when I started in the phone company, it was all centralized with a central office. Then you had a decentralized approach. And then finally, remember this goes back to my discussion of the internet and the history of the internet, you have a distributed architecture. So let me just remind you, as I went through in my telecommunications class, circuit switched. If I'm calling from Los Angeles to Washington, I create a connection, there's a circuit switched, and once that's connected, it's connected, and you're using those facilities. Then along came SS7, and we developed this new thing called meta-communication. And this is important because this is the new concept I'm providing to Hayek. So if I look at a voice call now from Los Angeles to Washington, you first set up meta-communication. This is, by the way, where you get caller ID from. This is how caller ID shows up. So the system says, hey, 213-555-1212 is calling. And then that appears on your phone. If you then accept the call, then you make the connection. And so you have now this new thing called meta-communication, or communication about communication. So now let me then relate this into community decision-making. Remember the distributed architecture? This looks like the distributed architecture. We have communication. All this information between, like circuit switched, goes on. But there's also this meta-communication that goes on. It's culture, language, laws, regulation, the invisible hand, spontaneous order. All that information, all that meta-communication is flowing, and sort of the tribal knowledge kind of thing, where you now have this community database that then informs the meta-communication. So if you have two people making a decision, they then can make a decision on their own. If you have these three people making a decision, they can make it on their own. You can have larger groups making it. So the point here being that it's not just central planning. Now every individual groups can form to create their own decision groups. Or you can have the whole community make a decision. Or you can just have one person make the decision. In the next lecture, I'm going to talk about the next part of this in terms of using the internet as a model to put Hayek into the 21st century. Thank you.